Okay, guys, it has been a couple of weeks, but I am back doing our little video Bible study. We are jumping kind of backwards in the Gospel of John, and we're going to be looking at John chapter 17. We're going to be looking at this now between now and Pentecost, this whole chapter just in small little chunks. It is the prayer that Jesus prays for his disciples. Um, Chapter 17 is so in the Gospel of John, the foot washing, which happens on Maundy, Thursday, so the Thursday of Holy Week, which is the night in which Jesus is betrayed slash arrested in the garden, and then Friday morning um, he is put to death on the cross. Uh, on that Thursday night, so John chapter 13 marks the foot washing, which is the beginning of the Last Supper encounter. And in the Gospel of John, chapter 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 all take place at that table at the upper room on the evening of Maundy, Thursday, of the Thursday of Holy Week. And so this comes after the foot washing, after the what we call the Last Supper, the final meal that they share together, after a lot of conversation about what Jesus, like he's preparing them from what's about to happen. It is after, like a part of that passage is the I am the vine, you are the branches, and this whole conversation about abiding, like we talked about, like drawing close to God. That all comes in here. And at the very tail end of that, there's this beautiful moment that's this transition between this conversation he's having with his disciples, telling them about what's going to happen, and them kind of having this discourse back and forth. And then when they head off to the Garden of Gethsemane, where he is handed over and arrested, this prayer, it lands right in the middle, chapter 17. And it is filled with all kinds of theological implications, but also it talks about the church and the broader world. And so we're going to spend the next few weeks looking at this chapter. And so this week, we're only looking at 5 verses of it. So John chapter 17, verses 1 through 5. So I'll read it and then we will pick it apart. So after Jesus had spoken these words, he looked up to heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, so that your Son may glorify you, since you have given him authority over all people, to give eternal life to all whom you have given him. And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. I glorified you on earth by finishing the work that you gave me to do. So now, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had in your presence before the world existed. Okay, so we're going to start at the beginning of that. After Jesus had spoken these things. So again, that's reference to all of this conversation from chapters 14, 15, and 16 that take place in the upper room at the final meal that they share together. So after all of that conversation, he being Jesus, looked up to heaven and said, the looked up to heaven is a signal of it being a prayer. That was the formal stance of prayer, was to like literally look up towards the sky. He's still inside, so it's not like he's outside looking up at the sky, but just to shift his gaze upward. And said, Father, the hour has come. So similarly to the accounts of the Lord's Prayer, we have this intimate, kind of simple name, of naming God. So it's not king, it's not ruler, it's not master, it's Father. And so there's some beauty to the intimacy of that. The hour has come. Now, just like this probably doesn't need to be explained, but it's not a literal hour. It is saying that time or the period that has been that he has been anticipating, that has come near. And so in Bruner, which is one of the commentaries, he translates the passage, instead of the hour has come, the weekend is at hand, knowing that he's looking at the final days of Jesus's life and then also the resurrection. So it's not just the crucifixion that's going to happen, the arrest and the crucifixion, but Jesus is also anticipating the resurrection that will happen a few days later. So the weekend has come, I think kind of captures that. Glorify your Son so that your Son may glorify you. And so then there's some conversation about what does it mean to glorify. And Barclay had some nice thoughts on this. That's another commentary. He kind of gives 5 different ways in which we see Jesus glorified in the cross and resurrection. And so, like, or how Jesus anticipates that glory. And he first talks about how historical figures often, how a lot of people who have left marks, their mark isn't recognized until after they have died, have passed away. You think about artists, you think about leaders and all kinds of different people. He goes through a variety of different things. But just this idea that looking back, we see a more clear vision of the impact that he has made. Completed the work, and so he has done everything that he could do on earth as far as revealing God and God's love to humanity. So he has done that, and he has followed God all the way to the end, followed the plan all the way to the end. And that the resurrection is a piece of that. So these are all of the pieces. I stopped numbering them. But that it's not just the cross, it's also the resurrection. And then this ultimate returning to eternity with God. We've got a lot of references to all in verse 2, since you have given him authority over all people, to give eternal life to all whom you have given him. And so we've got this totality, right? It's not given just to the church. The word that is translated here for people is literally flesh. So but it means people. So this idea of giving it to all of creation. And we see that in other places within the Gospel of John as well. We have reference to eternal life then, to give eternal life to all whom have given him. And this is eternal life, that you may know God, that they may know you. Sorry, let me read that again. To give eternal life to all whom you have given him. And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you sent. And so we get back to this conversation of eternal life, and we've talked about that on and off over the course of the last, years, but the last few months as we've thought about the Gospel of John. And the Greek word there is not a duration or a destination. It literally means like the quality of life of God. And so to possess it or to enter it is to experience the fullness of like God's vision for the world. So the splendor, the majesty, the joy, the peace, the holiness that is associated with God. And so in the Gospel of John, and really in all of the Gospels, eternal life isn't equated to life after death. So like the modern notion of heaven, but that eternal life is a quality of life that can be entered into even now and last eternally. And it is this communion, this abiding, this closeness to God. And we get that just next, right? This eternal life is that they may know you. And so we get kind of pulled back into that abiding, this idea of drawing close. What does it mean to know? It means both an intellectual knowledge of being familiar with God's teachings and God's acts and what God desires and God's, deep love and will for the world. But it's also an intimate experiential knowledge of a relationship. And so like the word know is used to identify a relationship between a husband and a wife, like that level of intimacy, to know each other that well. And so just as we are called to abide and draw close to God, we're acknowledging also in this that God, in the person of Jesus Christ, has drawn close to humanity. And that's what John chapter 1 talks about, and what John throughout his gospel is claiming, is that there's this mutual desire to be known, that God desires to be known by humanity, which is why he ultimately reveals himself fully in the person of Jesus. And then our desire to know God fully and to draw close and to be in that intimate connection. I loved in one of the commentaries that it points out that in chapters 1 through 12 of the Gospel of John, there's this deep conversation about eternal life, but then from when Jesus starts talking directly to his disciples in chapter 13 through 16, that eternal life becomes synonymous with this idea of love, that he references, that we love one another, that quality of life, that eternal life, the quality that is eternal life, is intimately connected to a deep, abiding love with God and with each other. Let's see. I glorified you on earth by finishing the work that you have given me to do. I liked how one of the commentaries pointed out that finishing the work, like he has finished the work, not because at this point it has been put to death and resurrected, but almost the fact that the people who are sitting around the table are a demonstration of him finishing the work, because he is passing on the mission. And yes, the cross and the resurrection are going to be the ultimate manifestation of that like great love and that great power of God, and that nothing stands between humanity and God. But also that the very fact that there's this group of people who have gathered, who have followed, and who will be sent, that's where, like, that's he's trusting the mission to continue on into its ultimate completion, which is, spreading the quality of eternal life to other people in a very broad way, which includes us, right? Like this, we are a legacy of this prayer, and we'll get more into that as we get into further verses. But we are the finishing work of all of that. So now, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had in your presence before the world existed. So to be close to God is the desire, right? To be ultimately united with God. And so he is acknowledging, as he kind of enters into these final stages, which is the, like, hours after this, he is arrested. And then, within hours of that, he is tried and convicted, and then crucified and dies on a cross. That in the midst of all of that, that God's presence, this deep abiding presence, remains. And I think that that's a gift to us as well, of just this reminder that even into the darkest moments, God follows. And I love here at this end prayer that we get this reference to Jesus re-entering eternity. So being in this state of glory with God the Father, like he was before the world existed. And so, hearkening back to chapter 1, where, it says, before the Word was with God and the world was God, and before anything was created, the Word existed. And so we're seeing, glimpses of all of these different pieces of the Gospel of John coming back now in this moment. And that's the end of verse 5. And so it's just this introduction to the prayer, acknowledging kind of the significance of who Jesus is, but also kind of just setting the stage for what's to come next. It's a great chapter. You can read ahead and get an idea of the whole scope of the prayer, but then we will continue over the course of the next few weeks, just kind of tiptoeing our way through it. so that we can really flesh it out and, enjoy all of the pieces of it. So it's nice to be back with you guys. I hope you enjoy this Bible study. See you on Sunday. Bye.